Hi everyone, this is Dr. Frank, and I want to talk about one topic that comes up every single day in my clinic, and that topic is, do I have ADHD? And I'm going to add, or do I have anxiety? And I want to start with a story. Let's say you are 14 years old and you're going out to go to school, and you put together all your stuff, you have your backpack ready, you have your shoes ready, you leave the house, and you're going to catch the bus. And on your way to catch the bus, you see this bird. It's a really cool bird. It's red, it has these stripes, and then you start watching it and it's making these really cool sounds, and you keep watching it and you kind of walk around and you start to remember, hey, no, I really do have to get to this bus. So you get back on the sidewalk and you keep walking and you pass by this neighbor's fence, and you've been noticing this fence every day for a couple of weeks now. It's sideways. And you're like, no, I really should fix that fence. It'd be really easy and really nice of me. So you go and you just push that fence over just so it's nice and perfectly straight. And you're admiring your work, and in the back of your mind you say, no, I really should get to my bus stop. I'm gonna be late for school. And you get back on the sidewalk and you keep walking and you notice this cool crack, but just as you do notice that crack in the sidewalk, you hear the bus pass you by. And you start running and you miss the bus again for the second time this week, and you feel terrible, but you decide to walk to school, and you walk all the way to school, 45 minutes, and you get to school and you get in trouble with the principal for being late again, and you try to explain, hey, I did my best, I walked all the way here, I put out all this effort, and they don't care, and you get in trouble anyways. And then you get into class and your teacher's already annoyed with you for being late, but then they somehow find that you're fidgeting and you get in trouble for that, and then the rest of the day is just kind of hell. And you can't understand why, because you put your best foot forward and it just didn't work out. So that would be an example of someone who might have ADHD. And versions of this are playing out everywhere all the time in childhood and adult lives too. Now let's look at a similar situation, but maybe with someone who has anxiety. So someone who has anxiety might have their shoes in their backpack ready since the night before. They don't want to be late. They know they don't want to be late. And they leave the house with their backpack and they're going, and then they think, oh no, did I forget my lunchbox? Even though they're 99% sure that their lunch is in their bag, they're asking, hey, did I forget that? And so they have to stop and they look in their bag and they open it up and okay, it's there. So they zip up their bag again, keep walking, and you start to think, okay, well, what about my pens? Do I have enough pens for the day? And you're able to reassure yourself, you're okay, you have enough pens, and you keep walking. And then you start to remember something your brother said to you or your sister said to you the night before, and it was really bothering you. And you get so distracted by this feeling that something just isn't right, that you stop walking. And just in time you remember that your bus is about to come, and you make a mad dash towards the bus stop. You get there just at the same time as the bus. You hop on the bus. But instead of feeling relieved that you got to the bus on time, instead now you're super stressed and you can't believe that you almost missed your bus, and you're so wrapped up in that you forget that you forgot to do your homework the day before and you had to do it on the bus. But now you're already at school, and now you're stressing out because you forgot to do your homework and you were almost late for the bus, and your day is just going downhill from here. Well, that would be more of an example of someone who suffers from anxiety. And you see a lot of similarities. You see the distractibility, you see the fact that it's hard to sort of get things done, but for very different reasons. And so let's talk about that. What is ADHD? So I follow a school of thought that comes from Dr. Amen from the Amen clinics. And he's someone who's done tons of research on brains through fMRIs, functional MRIs, which is a brain scan while you're thinking and a brain scan when you're not or at rest. And he's found out that people with ADHD have a lot of potentially different issues, but one of the main issues is a problem with the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that hangs out right in front, right behind your forehead. And that prefrontal cortex is basically the executive center of the brain. It tells all of the rest of the brain what to do. And in people with ADHD, that part of the brain actually isn't able to direct your thoughts and direct the other parts of the brain to dance in harmony. Instead, it's kind of silent. And what's more is that the harder you try to focus or the harder you try to concentrate, the less this part of the brain is actually able to work out. And that's one of the reasons why people with ADHD often have fidgeting, or they play with their hands, they play with their socks, they scratch, they pick. And the biggest reason is because that actually can distract the focus so that your prefrontal cortex is able to work better, because you're sort of distracting it with other things instead of trying to hyper focus it. And you see the same thing in anxiety, but someone who's picking or scratching in anxiety is because there are thoughts that they're trying to get rid of. There are these invasive feelings that they're trying to spill out. And so both might have fidgeting, but for very different reasons. Trouble focusing is one of the main things of ADHD, where you just sit there and you have the book in front of you. Let's use the example of a university student, and this is a true story of a patient of mine. She came to me, she's a university student, she was sitting at the library, and this has happened to her many times before, the day before an exam, and she knows she has to study, but the book sits in front of her closed. And why is it closed? Because she can't stop feeling that she's going to fail or she's not going to be good enough, and she can't really bring herself to open and start reading the book because of all that anxiety. Well, an example of someone with ADHD in a similar situation is they'd be sitting in the library, they'd open the book. You might even read the first few lines, and then you kind of get distracted. You start to think about what you had for dinner the day before. You start to think about someone you saw on the street. And every time you get back in and you focus more, and maybe you're able to read a half a page, maybe you're able to read a full page, but the second you turn that page, you kind of start thinking about other things. And that would be a similar example of someone with ADHD. Someone with ADHD has a million things on the go. You might find that you start one task, and then you start another task, and then you start another task, and you have, at the end of the day, 5 things half done, but nothing really done. Whereas someone with anxiety might have a million things on the go, but just because they can't bear to finish. For someone with ADHD, your brain might not shut off at night because it's thinking about thought after thought after thought, and there's just so much going on. For anxiety, your brain might not shut off, but it will be mostly about worries and thoughts and invasive feelings that you're having that you really can't just push out of your brain and get to sleep. Misplacing things is very common for someone with ADHD. You might always be putting things down and not remembering where they are. Whereas with anxiety, you can often misplace things, but it's really because you're distracted by thoughts. We talked about not being able to sit still and fidgeting, how that's different for both anxiety and ADHD, even though it can happen in both cases. And often being late or forgetting your appointments. Well, just like that story about the bus, someone with severe anxiety might be late or forget appointments because they're just so worried about getting ready, or they're so worried about being in large crowds, or they're so worried about being judged that they don't leave the house. Whereas someone with ADHD, instead of being so worried about all that, well, they just get distracted by 1,000,001 things before heading out the door. Thing about ADHD most commonly is ongoing since childhood. You'll have had some of these things going on since you were in elementary school, since as far back as you can remember. Whereas someone with anxiety very commonly will have gotten worse over the past year or two due to things in your life like financial situations or stress between friends, stress between your partner, family stress. So that's more common with anxiety. And often people with ADHD will actually have anxiety because there's so much that they want to get done, there's so much in their life that they need to accomplish, that and not being able to accomplish those things, they start to feel very anxious. And I know that I would. Whereas someone with anxiety, even with severe anxiety, won't often have ADHD. In fact, treating someone with anxiety for ADHD would likely make it worse, because the mainstay of treatment being stimulant medications, which for someone with ADHD activates their brain and makes that prefrontal cortex work all that much better. Well, in someone with anxiety, it would make them feel even more anxious because it's too activating, and someone with anxiety is already feeling very over the top and activated. So that is what I wanted to share with you about anxiety and ADHD. I hope you found this video helpful. Please share it with your friends, hit subscribe, hit like if you really found benefit from it. and make sure to follow for any future videos. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. How does ADHD feel for you? Or if you suffer from anxiety and thought you had ADHD, how's that been like? So please feel free to share. I'd love to hear from you, and have a wonderful day.